Hi, and welcome back to News from the Real World. You're joining us in 2019 now. I am Jeremy. I am a second-year technical direction grad.
I'm John. I'm a second-year lighting design grad.
I'm Jessica. I'm a second-year costume design grad. I got it.
And I'm Allie. I'm a second-year SMPM grad.
And this week, we're just pulling 10 articles that we feel have some merit or weight, and we would like to discuss a little further. Starting off, I think we have Allie.
Yeah, so a lot happened in the 4 weeks that we were away, including, the government shutdown. So, this one is on NPR. It's called As Shutdown Crawls On, Artists and Nonprofits Fear for Their Fragile Industry, in quotes. On all things considered, it was also covered on there. So basically, this is talking about, talks about three different things, basically. It starts with a lady who was planning to go to DC for the holidays, and her kids are super artsy, and they were really excited about all the things that they could see. And then the government shut down, and they lost thousands of dollars because they had to reschedule their trip. So, but that's on the low end. Yeah, that sucks, but it's a family vacation, okay. And then you think about how grants from the NEA and National Endowment for Humanities are reimbursement grants, so a lot of places are very concerned whether or not they've been approved for things, and now they're wondering if they're actually going to get their money. So the New York-based Theater for a New Audience has been bringing theater into children's schools and the poor, really, really poor areas. And it's partly funded by the NEA, and now, and they're approved. They have been approved for a $25,000 grant, and now that might not happen. And so there's all of these things, and people. There's a guy who both works in and produces for a national park in Hawaii, and he's so now my money's in question, and even my job security and location and everything. So. Big problem just all around, and whether or not this is going to continue and or happen again. So that's a thing. Pretty depressing start, but here we are, government shutdown, so.
It's kind of good to hear an article about how it's affecting the arts world, because I'm constantly hearing on the news how it's affecting the TSA and travel and the general government workers, which, it's all valid, but it's something you kind of forget, there are so many parts of society that are touched by the government and the shutdown, how it affects everybody. So
for sure, and the guy even says in here, he's people just kind of take for granted that the arts are always going to be there.
True.
You're always going to be able to go escape to the theater. It's well,
or even a park. You think the park, it's just trees are going to be there.
Yeah.
They're not.
Well, I remember last time we had a government shutdown in my hometown in southern Utah, the national parks would shut down also. And the last time it happened was in a busy season, and people would just start jumping the fence to try to get in because they traveled all this way, and there literally is just a barricade right there, and they're we want to go have a good time.
That's fine.
And it prevents them from doing that. And also deeply affects the revenue of the area of them being able to progress as a town and cities out there that depend on that.
Yeah.
So, that's rough.
Yeah. Tying into getting paid, though, and our salaries and minimum wage, there's an article on Datebook. For actors and other theater workers, minimum wage is often the maximum, too. This is by Lily Janik. And it goes through and talks about how for a lot of positions, $15 an hour is the base rate, and there's no real increase in sight for a lot of these people. Or they've worked for a few years to get to this $15 amount, and they've got families that they're supporting. They're, both parents are working at this rate, and to be in the arts, it costs money. We've been through this before. We've talked about this. There's been multiple articles about this. To afford to be able to do art, it costs money. And only having a $15 basically as your cap means that you are going to forever be in a certain style of life. And the fact that $15 an hour cap hasn't fluctuated much in many years. It's been that fairly stagnant. And then, it just goes on to talk about a few different people's experiences, mostly focusing on the actor's life and then how like equity contracts, if you're working for a small theater that's just starting out, you can still work under an equity contract for them, but they're only then required to pay you a stipend, not necessarily your minimum wage. So this means, you know, you'd be working a lot of hours, but then only for like 2 months of work get like $600. So it makes it really hard to be independent in this type of setup with only making that minimum wage.
And then theaters around the country are like, it's so hard to find artisans and craftspeople and all of the like technical directors that we need or whatnot. And it's like because everybody's going to corporate because that's what's paying, and it's paying the livable wage. Like, I think it goes back to like people always think like art's going to be there and stuff. It's like taking advantage of, I think, a medium that people are like, oh, it's not necessary, but like. It is so necessary to just the
doing art
psyche.
for art's sake.
Yeah,
It's hard to find people willing to do that nowadays because you know we all need money to survive and do it.
And yet we pay thousands of dollars every year to like people travel to look at all the different artworks of like Michelangelo and like Raphael and like, all these amazing like masters of their time, and then there's like, oh, like art of our time is like not worth paying for. I don't know.
Well, that's an interesting concept,
isn't it? Like you pay thousands of dollars to go look at the Mona Lisa, and you can have somebody recreate it for a stage piece, and it's incredible, and you're paying like $30 a ticket. It's so expensive. You know, you think about it. It's
or you're only going to pay that person $50 an hour to paint that for
yeah.
the show.
Yeah, and sometimes with like such accuracy and such artistry too. It's a little sad. Oh, so depressed.
It was something we talked about. I was just thinking, like, not only like the wage, but your job title and like your status anyway. And this was something we talked about last semester in one of the classes. I don't remember which one, but it was like you typically, if you're in a job at certainly like a regional theater or something, there's only so far up you can go, because like sometimes the people above you have those jobs and they're not giving those up. So like if you want to advance and increase your wage, you have to go to a different company and start like a whole new job. You can't. It's hard to go up in one company.
You have to move up from company to company almost. You can't. It's very rare to move up in a company, unless you're committed to being there for 40 plus years and want to wait till people either die or retire.
So dark.
Right? Yes,
but also like our shifts are also like it could be cross country, it could be different states. Like it's not like when you're going from one bank to another, or like, oh, like this bank's not paying me enough, I'm gonna go look at the other 4 options I have in this city. So it's also countering in all that information and how much it is.
A lot of time travel and moving expenses are not paid for.
Exactly,
so you have to have enough money in order to be able to afford to move to somewhere else to get a different job. So you get shoehorned very, very quickly.
Vicious cycle.
Yeah.
And then you're like, what's my side hustle? And then you're too tired to do a side hustle. So speaking of money and getting paid and minimum wage and all that jazz, the article I have is from the Washington Post, and it's Elizabeth Rowe has sued the BSO. Her case could change how orchestras pay men and women, by Jeff Edgers. So it's basically about Elizabeth Rowe, who is suing because she's making significantly less than her counterpart, who is an oboe player, and she's a flutist. And it seems like the basis of the argument from the side of the orchestra, which is one of the top 5 in the country, located in Massachusetts, is that to play the flute doesn't require as much skill as an oboe, and so therefore, based off of skill rate, they pay her like the salary expected of a first chair. And like she did go through a blind audition for this, and so they didn't know what she looked like when she was hired. And then the salary she says that she got is actually significantly lower because she's female. And yes, there is a pay
scale or rate.
And a pay gap certainly between men and women. The reason this is so hot as well is because it's taking place in Massachusetts, which just passed the equal pay law. So, the law was just passed, and these things do take time, but at the same time, it seems to be like a real discrepancy between like her belief about how she's getting paid and the industry and the orchestra paying her, which happens to be very female friendly to my understanding. So it just seems that, I don't know. It's like it's a good fight, and like it definitely should be done. And I was talking to Damien about it because Damien plays oh God, he's going to kill me. I can't remember what instrument he plays. But he was in, what I'm trying to say is that he knows a lot more about orchestras than I do. And he was saying that the flute is not as difficult as the oboe because the way that like solos are like written into the orchestral music, it's more oboe based. And so I thought that was really interesting. But I think that's sort of also saying like, I don't know. I think it's one of those things. It's like bridges like a pay scale for like technical, creative, or like skilled craft jobs versus it being like a pay scale of like all first chairs get paid this. So it's an interesting conversation. It's certainly it really could affect, I think, how orchestras do deal with their pay management for everybody. And I think it should also be an interesting story to watch in the face of like the Massachusetts passing the equity, the equal law.
One thing that I think is really interesting about this is to think about who the proprietor is of judging how skilled you are or not.
Yeah, because to me, I mean, I used to play flute, and back in the day when I was in 6th grade. And I thought it was hard. And so, just to sit there and be like, oh, it's an oboe and a flutist. I look at both of them like, you're all in the same orchestra. Like, you are so talented.
Well, and the thing is, like, it being skill-based versus it being chair-based, it doesn't mean it's a position that you can ever obtain. It means if the person judging it never, in their opinion, says that you don't have enough skill to get that pay bump, then you don't. It's not a position thing.
Well, right.
Much.
That's my thing. Like, the whole issue about skill, it is the Boston Philharmonic. Like, we're not saying
that they're not skilled.
Right. Like, you're not going to hire anyone who's not skilled in their craft. Yes, it is.
There should be enough labor there to have choice.
Right. There is technically a higher difficulty in playing the oboe, from my understanding. Because, I was in orchestra too. But, like, if we're talking about skill, I think the easiest, I mean, it's a little too late. They have to deal with this now.
Yeah.
But I think the easiest thing is to just have pay scales. Okay, if you're going to play the first oboist more than the first flautist, like, whatever. But
standardize it.
Make it public.
Yeah.
Put it out and be like, this is what we pay.
Well, it's like the different. I'm trying to like think about in corporate because like when I worked in fashion design, it's like an associate designer will get paid more than an assistant because technically there's higher requirements within the job. So it's like if you can actually like verbally say like this is what the job is, this is what's expected of you, like delineate it, like explain it, that kind of stuff. What are the expectations? And it's like, oh, if it's a $10,000 difference, that makes sense to me because, okay, they handle more like solo pieces, so that way they need to practice more and they're giving more into the, who knows? But like that's also, again,
overall, the more transparent any industry can be with their pay scales and who's getting paid what, that only ever helps the employee.
Exactly.
That's why employers like to produce a stigma of you really shouldn't tell people what you make at our company. Which
is bullshit.
There's nothing for the employee.
Correct. There's nothing for the employee because it depowers you. So you think that everyone is getting paid the same. Yeah. That's your only frame of reference.
Yeah.
But if you know that your other partner over there, who's less skilled but a man, is getting paid more than you, then you're going to raise some hell about that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so that's why the more transparent we can be, and as a country and as a people, we should push for that.
It's also holding a company accountable as well. Like when I first started out and I was making, I made like $26,000 as a assistant technical designer at Calvin Klein. And they were like, it's Calvin Klein, so that's how much you get to make. You're welcome for being here. And then when I found out that other people were making like 36, 38 in the same position, it gave me power to say, actually, I'm doing this and I'm doing more because I'm trying to prove to you that I want to be here. Like, I not only deserve this, but I've earned it. And like, hold the company accountable. Like the issue with theater is that we don't really have HR departments, but talk to production people, talk to a lawyer, talk to the creative director, the artistic director, like get smart about the business, get smart about the business side of it, and get smart about how you value yourself and what you're valued within the industry as well.
Yeah. Speaking about pushing for being valued, no matter what, and also gender, but I do kind of like that this does not make it all about gender. That's nice.
Right, it's refreshing.
Yeah. So this is on HowlRound, Radical Inclusion of Parent Artists by Lydia Millman-Schmidt. And she is in Chicago. She's talking about Chicago theater specifically, but generally all theater in the U.S. Does not really support artists who are parents. And oh my gosh, the statistics in here were kind of terrifying. Recent survey of parent artists, we found that 91% of respondents had turned down theater work because of scheduling or cost of childcare. On top of that, 70% said their income had stagnated or gone down since becoming a parent. In an industry where we make so little.
Oh my God!
91% turned down work because
I'm gonna quote this at the next holiday where they're like, "Why aren't you engaged or married or pregnant?" And then I'll be like, "Well, according to this article, hold please, a baby's usually babies are usually 5 Mercedes, but this one I can't afford any of that. I can barely afford my cats."
Right, we already make so little comparatively to like a lot of other professions that it's like, oh, okay. So there's that stigma, but there is a theater that does support parents, and they are very general in that term, which is awesome, which makes me think that they also support like time off for men is in addition to women. Mm-hmm. And so it's called Rivendell Theater Ensemble, which makes my heart really happy. And so they do stuff like they don't do 10 out of 12s. They do daytime rehearsals. They have a 5-hour work week. 5 day.
I was like, oh shit! You're really tying me up.
5-day work week with 2 consecutive days off, including one of them on the weekend. And there's like toys in the rehearsal hall. There's like a tent with books in it. Like backstage.
Truly, that's what I expect from a theater. When I hear theaters are not like supportive of family, like it's not even just like children or parents. It's like families. Like as a theater, we are a family. We're a community. We constantly talk about being a family, and then you kind of turn the door and you're like, but not if you have kids. You can't work here.
And it's
you're like, I'm sorry, what?
1950s view. Like, oh, did you have a kid? You can't come back to work. Like,
home.
What?
You have to be a stay-home mom or stay-home dad.
I just think the government should pay stay-at-home parents like a 9 to 5 and give them, you know. But that's cool. We'll talk about that later.
And that ties back into like, you should be doing this for art's sake. Like, why are you? You know, a lot of parents. It says a lot of parents are not standing up for themselves. And saying, hey, I need to be home by this time because my kid gets off the bus, or hey, I need to, you know.
Because I don't want my kid to become a serial killer because I've like literally abandoned them.
Well, even in
not
like
asking for it,
a lot of states, you can't leave your child unattended unless they're over 13 years old.
Right.
Yeah, because it makes sense.
You have to be there legally. Legally, one of the parents has to leave their job if they're working past that time and meet the school bus.
But it's awful to, as a theater, as a progressive. A place that boasts of being progressive to be like, oh, we're not going to hire you then because sorry.
You can't make that 10
won't be able to
12,
commit enough time.
Absurd anyways.
Yeah, exactly.
You won't be able to not have a work-life balance enough to.
Right. Yeah. And I can only honestly see that going well because if you think about it, I mean, like, for the theater, it's more money, right? But if you have a big theater, right, and you have people who have kids, and you have someone who is there, and there's like a daycare, you are employing another person or 2 other people, and and like, yes, it's more cost for you, but you're going to get more out of it, and you're going to have artists who know that you care about them.
And they're going to be happy, and they're going to be there to support you when you need. It's like, oh, this has just happened. We need to get this show off the ground.
Right.
Well, you know that you're going to be supported enough to be able to help get everything off the ground.
And also, like, a lot of the after-school childcare is so expensive. Sometimes people have to work another job just to pay for that. Yeah. So, you know, having that as part of the job, a lot of parents will see that as added value. Like, you're not paying me the high end of the pay scale.
But it's the benefits,
But it's the benefits.
Also, I'm sure you could throw, like, an extra $4 at each ticket.
Right. There's so many ways you could do it. I mean, if you have a children's theater program, you build that as part of it.
Yeah.
So the kids in the day...
You're so smart. Like, you could do a summer program. That money from the summer program can go into paying salaries of people that need to... Build a community.
Yeah.
Well, I remember in my undergrad, I had a professor who, one of the students had kids. They were returning to school with kids. They're like, I have my kids today. Is that okay? And they're like, yeah, that's totally fine. And then the professor had to bring their kid in one time because of something fouled up with daycare. Yeah. And everyone's like, we're totally okay with that because we understand it's life.
It's kind of funny. It's like back in the day, like kids were so part of like the adult sphere of being like, you're here, you're in the room, you're helping. And this, like, I think is my general observation on children rearing. So adept at it, but like watching like the older generations being like children were part of the chores, the workforce. They were helping out the parents. They were there. It wasn't about
That's
like
more the Montessori teaching method now.
Yeah, and then it wasn't really about like catering to the child entirely. And I think like after the 50s, like all we do is like cater to the child, and then we've created this separation of like church and state in the home, where it's like the separation of the parents and the children and separate lives. And like actually, it goes back to this concept of like community, like. If you need to bring your kids with you, like it's fine. They're part of your life. Like, it's a thing. People bring, it's okay, cool.
No, so it's really great to hear that.
If people can bring their dogs in, I'm pretty sure we can bring a kid in.
Right? It's so true. And like, parent your kids. Don't see. Is that a spider bite?
God. So in a unfortunately negative side to. We don't support women in this industry. So Ashley Judd accused Harvey Weinstein, and that's been going on for a while, but now the judge says that she was only sexually harassed in the colloquial sense, and the lawsuit was dismissed, actually by this judge for the second time. This is by Vivian Kane on themarysue.com, and so...
What does the colloquial sense mean?
So the first time this judge dismissed her case, he said that it was because it didn't meet the standard of harassment under California law.
Cool.
And they redid the law.
Yeah.
And so it's an entirely new law, and the judge even said, oh, this is an entirely new law. And now he's dismissing it because it cannot be applied retroactively. So even though he's not denying her claims that she was harassed, he's denying her the ability to sue for harassment.
Okay.
Because it wasn't a crime yet.
Because
the
so
law hadn't changed until
told her the
after.
precedent for her case didn't apply to prospective employers too. Cool. So.
Oh yes, and also because because she possibly lost a job on Lord of the Rings with Peter Jackson because Harvey Weinstein badmouthed her.
Oh, she would have been so good on Lord of the Rings. Their mistake.
Yeah. I agree.
But I mean, that's part of this industry. Is so much of this industry is word of mouth, and is like built upon that about what people know about you before they even meet you.
Yeah. I wonder if it's something where it's like you go and you do a slander, like, or
slander, defamation.
Yeah, something like that too, where you're like, okay, cool. If you're not gonna get it for this, you're gonna do it. And like, I mean, it kind of goes
defamation of character.
Yeah,
if she's not gonna get it for harassment, but like that's so.
That is hard to prove without the hard evidence of it.
And that's so much harder of a lawsuit to get through. Yeah. Defamation is like because they're not guilty. You have to prove that.
Because if that was so much. Peter Jackson said, "Yeah, I didn't give her this job because I heard this from that." Then
there's
you have
a case
a
there.
case.
Yeah, totally.
But like if she's saying, I might have lost his job because of these two knew each other and they could have talked about it. That's so obscure. It's hard to.
And I wonder why this judge is taking such a tooth and nail. What?
Such an old man syndrome against it.
Yeah, like what are they getting out of it? Are you so afraid that if she is proven correct, like what the repercussions are? Like it's one of those things where it's like, oh, what I hear was so bad. It was like guys who get called out on harassment who feel uncomfortable about it. Oh, I can't even remember. Never mind. I'm gonna butcher it, so I'm not gonna say it. But it was something like So I just wonder like what stake he has in this, and then also.
Well, I mean, it sets a precedence whichever way he rules.
Totally.
Because the court system sets the precedent.
Yeah.
And it could be that he doesn't want to set the precedence of being able to go back and
What is the California law of harassment? Can you Google that?
I can Google that. I remember, didn't we had an article back in the fall about how the California law system in general is very broken, and like there were
I
multiple cases where they were like, no, this isn't harassment, no, it's not harassment, no.
I mean, like if you listen to like other podcasts, like You Must Remember This is a really great one. It talks about like old Hollywood and like how the beginning 100 years of like what happened and the level of just manipulation and just like really just like going through women like every 4 years. If you like, there's a Dead Blonde series.
There's going to be manipulation.
There's a series part of it called Dead Blondes, and it goes through all of the platinum blondes in Hollywood that have like died, and like half of them were like mysterious, most of them were drug overdoses, that kind of stuff. And it's just because the studio just kept feeding them drugs to just like make them happy and do what they wanted, and they were so replaceable. And on top of that, like it's just like you wonder like people are like, oh, the Me Too movement now is like, it's so strong. It's because of like what happened 100 years ago, and people being like, you know what, actually that 5-pound clause is no longer acceptable. If I lose or gain 5 pounds, you should not have the right to fire me. Something like that kind of stuff. And it's like, this was stuff instilled ages ago, but you can see the trickle down effect of how it's just affecting other people's lives. And like, it just should be held accountable now. Like, we're smarter, we're better, we can be better, we have all the resources to be better.
I mean, there's like the federal laws, like fair employment and like all that stuff.
Yeah.
But it and like no harassment in the workplace and all that, and it says that like they're all protected, but it depends on what things cross the, like what actions are considered crossing the line.
Sure.
And I think it is interesting. It talks about inappropriate jokes and physical harassment, verbal threats and all that. It doesn't talk about like defamation of character. Like if you do something, right? You know what I mean? Doesn't say anything about that.
And that's that, because I guess I wonder if that would like underlie like bullying or something like that. And it's you know, both the same, two different parts of the same issue.
And I think again, it's like the proving it, but the fact that he doesn't even want to take it on, like he just doesn't even want to handle it. It's like, come on, making it worse, you know, like
like this. I'm like, what is he getting out of this?
Right.
That's my question. There's some red flags there.
Unfortunately.
Talk about things that are broken.
Oh yeah, totally. Ooh. That was rough for this person. Okay, so this is from The Lark. It's Why I Broke Up with the American Theater, and it is by Andy Lucian. And this is a really interesting article. It's very emotional, and it goes through.
Good read.
It is a good read. It takes you through a realm of emotions, but it basically centers around this person who is a performer, and they injured themselves while doing a show. And we're under this mentality of the show must go on. And so while they, you know, brought up I have been hurt to like the stage management and production and to the director, like thinking like, oh, this might not be safe. Nobody really corrected the situation because they sort of looked at this person who was saying, I can still do it, who really shouldn't have been doing it. Being like, you can still do this, right? Go do this, the show must go on. And so it's a really interesting article. It brings up a lot of questions about advocacy and advocating for oneself on behalf of like a company or against a company. And I think that, like, in my opinion, you know, in show business, the beauty about it is that the show must go on. It is this romantic ideal that was like born out of the vaudeville stages of like, the show must go on. The show really...
Otherwise we don't get paid.
Because otherwise we don't get paid. We are traveling.
Especially in that time.
Especially in that time period. And again, back to the earlier days, like things have trickled down. And it's no longer applicable or appropriate to say the show must go on. Of course, the last thing you want to do is shut a show down, lose all that money. But in the face of like what? And I think that it's one of those issues where... Again, because there's no HR department or something like that, it's hard to be an advocate for yourself and find a like system to help with like filing a claim or saying like, oh, I've been hurt. I think that as a performer or anybody doing anything on theater, like my staunch belief is that you are your strongest advocate and you should never be afraid to say no. Because if anybody says to you, well, we have 10 other people out there that are just like you who want this job, they can go fuck themselves, because you are a person who is a talented artist. You are worth being there. You're worth fighting for your voice in that room, and you absolutely should never put yourself at injury's risk. And if somebody's not listening to you and they're not taking your concerns seriously, then they're not doing their job. And that is a problem. And so, he's saying, I talked to the stage manager and then left it into the stage manager's hands. To me, that's not okay. You are your own advocate. However, talk to those people. If it's not happening,
it has to be a conversation.
It has to be a conversation. But never let it get to the point where this person herniated 3 discs and all, and it's some horrible stuff. And as a performer, being a dancer, I get it. You constantly push through the pain. As a ballerina, you're taught to dance through the pain, and then they do reference how epic it is when Michael Jordan played. I remember, I think it's 1999. I can't remember her name, but she was the American gymnast who broke her ankle, and she did that fucking vault launch and just landed perfectly. It was so epic, but it taught the wrong thing. It was yes, it's such a beautiful moment, and that person is striving through the pain, and we watch this in movies where people are sword fighting and they get their arm cut off and they're going through the pain and they're fighting for the thing, but nothing is really that epic right now.
If you get your arm cut off, just call it quits.
Don't do that.
Go on with the show.
It is not just a flesh wound.
Yeah, it's not just a flesh wound.
I agree for advocating for yourself, but I do think that more theaters have to do the thing, like with the intimacy directors, right? You need to have someone there whose sole perspective is only to look out for everyone's safety.
And the more people complain about it, the more you stand together and you say this is not okay, then my thing is there were multiple times where I think a few people were injured or said, oh, it's not safe if we run backstage. If those, I can't help but think in my mind, if those 2 people were we're not doing this, then the stage manager should have been actually that is unsafe. And you know what? The director's crazy. A director is not God in the room.
Right. And that's hard to remember because honestly, as the stage manager,
treat them like that.
I've talked to a director and said, I am worried about this. This is unsafe. And he looked at me and said, don't worry about it. He literally said, don't worry about it.
Yeah, and that's an older generation, I think, of mindset as well.
And also, the general safety umbrella of the theater in past has always fallen on either the production manager.
Exactly.
If the production manager's not there, it's usually the technical director, and then, or it's the technical director in conjunction with the stage manager.
Or stage soup, yeah.
And
but all of those jobs have
other things they should be focusing on. Yeah, exactly.
So theater needs more HR managers.
Yeah, and one of the thing is those people need to do everything they can to not perpetuate that. The show must go on. I know when I am in a TD role, I have to assume some measure of safety, consciousness, making sure we're not doing things safe, being that person to say, no, this is unsafe, this has to stop. But also, when someone does get hurt, being the one to tell them, you should sit down, you should take your time, you don't need to run back on right now. Being that more insistent to overcome their, I just got to get on, I just got to finish it.
There's no place for the martyr.
They're still in shock. Whenever you get hurt, your body's still in shock, you're not making rash decisions. You need to have that time. Yeah. And 9 times out of 10, if you give them that time, they'll be like, I really shouldn't continue.
Yeah. And I mean, they mentioned sneakers that were uncomfortable and all this stuff. And it's I just think I see so many red flags here of even talking to the costume designer and talking to the assistant. Yes, I have worked with some costume designers that are I don't care if she's wearing that. Or he's wearing that, and I don't care if they can't move. And I just think that
your own best safety advocate.
Yeah, and I think that's also teaching us to design better and think better and think more around holistically about the whole process. But I think it goes back to not being you are educate yourself. That is all I can say about that. And if you're afraid and you don't feel like you have a voice or you don't want to have the voice in the room, talk to somebody else, a friend or a colleague or something like that. That's always a good idea. It's about advocating for mental health. Also advocate for your own physical well-being.
Speaking of advocating.
You are on fire.
TheAmericanTheater.org, their editors wrote an article about Disabled Artists Launch National Disability Theater, which is awesome.
Yes.
So the company they're exclusively going to contract actors, designers, directors, and staff who have disabilities of any sort. I'm pretty sure awesome. Any sort of, which is great. And what I really love was a statement in here. So they talk about that they want to have a great impact of everyone being part of this. And he says, we want to flip the script and eliminate the single story of people with disabilities, showing that we are neither inspirational nor charity cases, just powerful and ferocious professionals, which I think is amazing, because so many times people are like, they single out the one person instead of just showing how they're just someone who is being awesome at what they do.
Yeah.
And there's a whole group of them. And I think this is going to be an amazing opportunity for them to be able to showcase all of this by having a company that's like, no, we can do this. Easy. Yeah. It's going to be amazing.
I love that.
Yeah. I remember talking to a friend about the casting decisions of, and it's interesting that they reference Curious Incident because we were talking about that one too. Right. And I said, personally, I don't understand why you would not actively seek out people for that role who had a disability. Like, come on. And we were going back and forth on it, and it's just really great to know that there's a theater that's committed to this and a group that's committed to this, because it's like there's no reason. There's no reason.
Yeah.
Honestly, it's one of those things, if you say it's about time.
Yeah. We have the capabilities to do these things now, and we should be doing these things.
As everyone that is able-bodied, support it.
Yeah.
You need to get out there and support it.
Yeah.
Right, and not only in cases, like, not only in roles where that is the defining factor.
Correct.
And also, like,
just people doing awesome things.
Yeah. And I've been in the fit room enough with many people to the point where, like, everybody has a disability at some level. Like, Damon and I talk about this because when we did, like, the clothing that was adaptive, it's like somebody could have a hip replacement and you may not know, or like something like that. So it's like everybody should be supporting this, because it affects everybody's lives, and it's such a great, it's just about damn time. Like, you know?
Hell yeah.
Speaking of things that we should support, this article on the Odyssey Online is why high school musicals should be as respected as sports programs are.
I love that this article is chosen.
Right.
Yes.
So, this is, under the subtitle of The Arts Are Important Too. This is by Duffy Zimmerman. And then he goes through and basically talks about the experience that they had in going through middle school and high school, and how musicals were supported to some manner by the school. But looking nowadays, a lot of schools are pooling funding for the arts, which means those musicals, there's no budget to do that. You have to pay for the rights for a lot of the musicals that are out there.
It's because people think art's always going to be there.
Right? And also, it's not free to produce a musical.
Yeah.
Like, you don't, it's not like Shakespeare, where, those are open source at this point.
Yeah.
You still have to pay rights and royalties. And then that money is shifting to the sports, because that's the big headline thing for the schools. And look at us, we're doing things. And this to me makes me very excited to talk about Texas. Texas has a policy of, for every dollar that is spent on sports in a school district, there has to be a matching dollar spent on the arts.
That's so much.
No matter what it is, which is why so many schools are, so many fine arts programs are now recruiting from Texas region, because the high school facilities there are better than a lot of the colleges across this country.
Yeah.
Because they, the football team gets a new stadium. We have to sink a big chunk of money now into the arts. They get a new performing arts center.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
Or they get a whole new set of lighting, or they, so the skilled technicians are getting great opportunities, and because there's all this new stuff and there's this energy about it, it's making people want to partake in it, making them want to act in it, making them want to get involved, and I think it's doing wonderful things for those people's education.
Yeah, and you're treating it like seriously, because I read this. There was an article like 15 years ago in the New York Times that was like why you should hire a theater professional. So it's like, even if these kids are never going to go into theater, you're teaching them such valuable life skills that, like, it's like the
transferable skill sets.
Exactly, transferable skill sets. And it's like, yes, you do learn this on sports teams and all that stuff, how to be a team player and all that stuff, and that's great. But like, we cannot forget that there are a group of people that don't want to play soccer. Okay, I just want to dance.
Well also like, a lot of the times, working with other people in sports involves, I don't like this person, so I can tackle them to the ground in aggression.
True.
Not, I have to immediately work with them throughout this whole scene.
Exactly.
It's also, you talked about, they might not go into theater. A lot of people in sports are not going to go into sports later on. I mean, that's just how it is. And
So
it's amazing how that's happening. In my hometown, the theater program I went to was really good because the teacher worked extremely hard to get funding and
Yeah.
to get outside sources of funding and to be able to support it. And he went to any of the other 4 high schools in the area, and their theaters didn't have as much funding because he had to go out and get extra funding from other companies who were willing to support the
It
theater.
gives them an appreciation for the arts.
And it took over 20 years to build up that type of thing instead of already having the support there to then produce stuff that then made talented students who went off and did a number of other things, but who all had that background that then helped them succeed in life.
Yep.
I can echo that. Like, if my high school's theater program wasn't the way that it was, I first off never would have made friends, and second of all, like, I definitely would never have found my outlet.
You wouldn't be here today.
I wouldn't be here.
Exactly.
Like, all those things, like,
Talking about like mentoring and not being, getting us to where we are. Variety also has an article of Time's Up Entertainment announces new industry mentoring initiative. And this is the creation of an initiative called Who's in the Room, which is an industry mentoring initiative with the goal to increase the presence of people of color from diverse backgrounds in the entertainment industry's executive ranks. This is currently funded by a $500,000 grant from CBS.
awesome.
Now,
So they have the grant.
I
I
understand.
feel like CBS could have given a little more.
I understand that they're being funded by CBS, but as a lot of things, you have to follow the money and wonder what is the intent. Is the intent of, if I give this money, then we can sweep all these other issues under the rug?
Blood money.
Or
Dark.
now we have control over who we're going to be getting into these things.
Yeah.
So true.
Is
Yeah.
it like a
True.
funneling system?
Yep.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's beginning with some pilot classes of 10 students, and then it's going to expand to 50 students in the next 2 years. So it's not like a huge mentorship program, or it's
Well,
it's a
positive
smaller
outlook though
group.
that they have a
There's
good
a-
intention in
I
mind.
think this is a good
and
start.
hopefully-
Yeah.
But it's got a long
I
way
mean,
to
I'm
go.
sure like Netflix will hear about this and they're like, I see your 500,000 CBS. Here's 1.5 mil. Also come work for us. And no, Netflix just shutting it up.
There's a hope, but
There's a hope.
yeah.
Not that that's an entirely bad. Like, it's not all evil. You know
Right?
what I mean? Like,
Yeah,
if that,
I think it's
if that gives people the ability to
It's not all evil.
No. If that gives
No,
them
it's so true. It's like a reminder to us to not be so
like that,
negative
like
too.
if it gives them the ability to know that like that career is a possibility, and then open them up to those jobs, and then possibly.
Initiative was spearheaded by a group of industry
veterans.
veterans, Netflix vice president.
Yep.
And then like if that is a connection to jobs that they get afterward, like it's
No,
good
I
for them.
don't.
Like,
I,
that's
I honestly
fine.
don't
But,
think
like,
that any thing that could be trying to increase diversity in the workforce is bad.
completely.
Yeah.
Completely,
I just think people need to mindfully take into consideration
what's behind it.
where the money's coming
Exactly.
from.
What's
in
the
general.
cord tied to
Correct.
that deal?
Yeah.
The string
So.
tied.
Yeah.
Just to end on a positive note, I
Right.
guess. I don't know.
Ending on a lighter note.
And then I gotta go to class.
I'm really excited about this. This one is the San Diego Opera planning hackathon on cutting edge stage technology. It was in the San Diego Tribune, written by Pam Cragen, and basically it's a place for it's the opera world kind of interacting with all the new technologies in there, and then trying to find out new ways to produce these experiences.
Mhm.
They
And
talk
integrate
about,
it into
integrate it.
everything.
They're talking about
That's awesome.
how 3D printing, intelligent virtual augmented reality, all these different things that could be included, which is
Oh
great.
my god, that's so cool.
Yeah, which is awesome, especially like it was talking about an opera used to be way back hundreds of years ago is what pushed forward all the new, even
Innovation.
just the gas light that we had, the gas lamps that we had
It's-
originally,
yeah.
but it just kind of fell back to the wayside, and it
Yeah.
shouldn't because it has such a great potential to push out new things and try new things.
And also, one thing I really felt like about this is that if it's VR, no one has a bad seat.
Yeah.
I know
Everyone's
how
seeing,
cool is that? You get to
like,
listen and watch
and also
something
as an
awesome
artist,
together.
you can control so much more so what they are seeing.
Yeah.
I
I
mean,
would go to
like,
an opera every weekend. For
and
that.
things like this, as if it is a VR,
Yeah.
you can have stage crew walking across stage that they can't see.
Great.
Yeah. Well, the other great thing, one of the things is this, how projection can be used to create a costume change, right?
I'm into it.
Like there's all sorts of at the moment there's limitless possibilities.
Mm-hmm.
We just
It's
there
funny 'cause,
hasn't been the opportunity to do it.
I feel like a lot of people say like how archaic opera is, but in my personal limited experience, it has always been very innovative and like trying strange things. I'm like, we're just gonna try it
I think
out.
we're in an exciting time of
Yeah.
all this new potential. I just want to see how well it sticks or how well it
Totally.
integrates with things, because
Well, it has to if it wants to continue.
I mean,
correct.
that's
That's what I'm saying. We have all these new ideas, but for me as the cautious optimist on the backside as a TD, I'm like, I'm not wanting to invest a ton of money into that until I see that it's sustainable or we're actually getting the trade-off that we want from it.
I mean, they're going to have to invest in it in some way, because I don't think that people want to sit and watch people sit and sing. I mean, maybe they do. Maybe people. I mean, people definitely do. Yeah. Don't get me wrong.
But opera is the dying.
It is the and I think that to bring it into, because you have to think of it like, what are we all competing with, like for entertainment? This is actually very cool. What a cool concept.
Yeah, and just. They're developing all this information so they can then adapt it to what they need to instead of having to deal with instead of us having to adapt other technologies into our industry, it's already adapted for us.
Could you imagine like an interactive theater experience of like watching like King Lear or something, or like being a part of being a part of in such a real way, like what playground piece? Who wants to do virtual reality?
Right. Cautious optimism.
Yeah.
I think that's
the cautious optimism to close on.
All right, 2 minutes, gotta go class.
All right, but thank you for tuning in, and we will see you next week.